Hello and welcome to another episode of Exploring Standards. I am your host, Jess, and today I have the absolute pleasure of talking to Claire Walker, Director of Lazarus Training, and Alistair Hollington, Director of Training at the Lazarus Training. How are you both?
Very well, thank you. Yourself?
I'm very good, thank you. Thank you so much for joining me on the show today. So Lazarus Training are clients of Assent. And that's why we thought we'd get you on the show so we can talk a bit about your certification, the sort of certification process that you have been through. So Lazarus Training are currently certified in ISO 9001, which is the quality management standard. So before we kind of get into the juicy bit, can you tell our listeners a little bit more about Lazarus Training and both your roles within the company?
Sure. So Lazarus Training, as the name kind of implies, is a training company specialising in medical and safety training. So that takes us from short courses for maybe new parents wanting to know how to do CPR, through the whole sort of suite of workplace courses, which is where we probably spend most of our time, and then on to things that take us further afield, including overseas. So the international dimension of the company was one of the things that kind of drew us towards ISO certification.
So as I said earlier, this podcast is all about your ISO journey. We're going to talk about the implementation of ISO, your objectives and the benefits. So why did you guys decide to get an ISO certification?
So as a company, it's a common story, I think. When we sort of set up, we were a sort of small concern. And whilst experienced in the area, we had the sort of subject matter knowledge. As a small company, we wanted to make sure we had all our processes in place. We wanted also to kind of be independently audited. So when we were speaking to people, they could have some sort of faith in us, really. And we were very lucky. We picked up some kind of quite significant clients very quickly because of that background and reputation, perhaps. But the ISO system allowed us to stop, plan what we were doing, look at it at a more strategic level, and the sort of the processes we went through gave us a much better understanding of how we would deal with problems, how we would scale up, as has been the case. So yeah, it was kind of almost a bit of a kind of, let's make sure we do this right, like measure twice, cut once type thing, that if we did this ISO thing at the beginning, it would give us a number of benefits.
That's great to hear. Often we do actually get clients who come in and say, oh, this is a requirement for a contract, so let's get it done next month. And we're like, yeah, that's not quite how it works. So it's great to hear you guys saying, actually, this will help with improvement.
I think we were just slightly ahead of the curve on that. I mean, it has then come up, which is again one of the reasons why we're so glad we've done it. But I'd like to think it was more like we wanted to make sure we had all the processes in place so that when we were speaking to companies, because the work we do, first aid training and medical training, is quite often people have like a sporadic requirement rather than like big, long, ongoing things. So if a company would come to us and say, tell us a bit about your quality management system, then as part of their decision making of who they'll give the work to, it was good to have it in place.
That's fantastic to hear. So how do you find the implementation process?
Well, I think if I had to do it myself, I think then it would have been much more of a kind. I'd look even more haggard than I do now. But we were quite lucky that we were able to hook up with Assent, and they were able to kind of guide us through the process. And I think I probably made them a bit more haggard with some of my questions and some of my answers to their questions. But it was not easy, but it wasn't as hard as I think I probably thought it was. And I'd worked at other places where quality management was one person's full-time job and stuff. So initially I thought it'd be really onerous, but when you carve it down and make sure it's actually bespoke to the organization that you're working for, then I think it's not as bad as you would think. But we definitely benefited from Assent services because they got experience going through it. They could interpret some of the kind of I don't know if it's guidelines or standards is the phrase which is used, but some of the wording in it gets a little bit kind of not far off legalese kind of thing. So they were able to say, now what this actually means is, or you don't need to worry about this clause or that clause. So not as bad as I thought it would be. Still took quite a bit of work, but we really benefited from Assent's like professional assistance in getting through the process.
Obviously, coming from Assent side, it's fantastic to hear, and it can be quite a lengthy process. But as you said, kind of telling it to your company as well has made it work, which is fantastic. I feel like maybe you've already answered this question slightly, but I'm going to go for it anyway. And how does an ISO consultant help you?
Yeah, I would say I think you're right, but my answer doesn't give full credit to the consultant. I think then that they kind of took time to learn about what we were doing, they also took time to learn about what we wanted to do, like how we wanted to make this ISO thing work for us. Then they sort of really did seem to understand like kind of what we were trying to do. They'd gone off and thought about it, and yeah, they say, as I've already said, they kind of made it more understandable and less daunting, really, when you sit down and read those clauses and stuff, and we're like, well, I don't understand what this means. And they say, well, what we've done elsewhere is we've seen this work, and so yeah.
Our consultant really guided us through the process from start to finish, and along the way, as we've had our reaccreditations, certifications, been really helpful because the consultant understands the business. It really helps us each time we move forward when the standards change.
That's a big one, isn't it? Yeah, I think Kathy was your consultant.
Yeah.
And she's brilliant. She's very good at grasping kind of individual for each business, and also taking examples from her other clients and her other experience and drawing that into the new clients, which is, I think, always a big help, because sometimes you just don't know things, and experience with other people can really, really help. So it's great to hear that.
Yeah, it's very much like a consultation thing, like as in spoke to us, listened to what we wanted to say, gave us some guidance, but then kind of left us to make sort of decisions, but supported those decisions, if that makes sense.
Yeah, absolutely. So can you tell us a bit about your current objectives?
Well, as a training company, we set up in 2011, and so here we are in 2023. You've obviously got to grow during that time. Some of that's been quite organic. Objectives that we had this year were to change some of the accreditation of our courses, without being too dull about it. The courses normally have somebody behind the scenes that lays out the syllabus and stuff. So we've moved some of our courses there. We've also, going back to that international point I mentioned at the beginning, we've been increasing the amount of work that we do internationally, overseas training. And so that's been sort of two kind of core objectives, really, kind of reaccrediting our training systems and then expanding into a couple of sort of connected markets.
That's fantastic. Have you found achieving your previous objectives? Obviously, you said you've been certified since 2011, so you've been certified for quite a long time. Have you found achieving your previous objectives?
Well, there's some sort of satisfaction in crossing things off a list, isn't there? It's supposed to release something in your brain or something, isn't it? So I think we've found it quite sort of satisfying working through, like knocking off bits and pieces. From an ISO point of view, we went through the change in the standards 20 to 2015, is it 2018? We went through that a couple of years ago, which again gave us a good chance to sit down and look at what we're doing. And I think overall, yeah, that we've kind of gone our way through. Most of our objectives that we set on our framework have kind of been ticked off. There's a couple that kind of lurk there, but they're the kind of those evergreen ones of like increased customer satisfaction by X percentage and so on. So yeah, I'd say overall, I think we're working our way through the targets, the objectives that we're setting ourselves, and along the way we're kind of maintaining our ISO sort of system.
Perfect, wonderful. So apart from the certificate itself, what other benefits have you found?
Apart from meeting Cafe and Assent and all of them. I'm sorry, Rob, if I haven't mentioned you. And I'm trying to think, Jasmine in the office as well, who kind of obviously is the powerhouse behind them all. Yeah, I think it's made us stop and think every now and again. And I don't know if it's a secret, but kind of sometimes people leave things to just before audits and sort of suddenly kind of rush and get everything ready. And having that sort of cycle of knowing that we've got to review things at a certain point because then there's an audit coming has made us a little bit more disciplined and kind of and stopped us being that kind of doing your homework on the bus on the way to school type thing, that we've actually like planned a bit more. And I think that's then teamed down into other things that are actually probably outside of the ISO quality management stuff. But if you're planning, like, then that's got to be good.
Yeah, absolutely. And you said earlier as well, getting new tenders and whatnot, having this certificate has helped you as well. It was kind of being ahead of the curve, which is always fantastic to hear.
Yeah, I think definitely. And I say nowadays it's very difficult to kind of judge what's the right thing, isn't it? If we're watching the news, like, is this real news or fake news? And again, with tenders and stuff, people can say what they like. Whereas if you've got things like your ISO quality management framework or any of the other standards as well, it's measurable and someone else has come in and measured it. So it's not just us two saying, yeah, we've got a quality management system. In our case, BSI say, yes, it's up to standard because we've checked it.
Yeah, that's perfect. You know, kind of getting that outside voice, kind of giving you authenticity into what you're saying, which always is helpful.
Definitely. And then also, to be fair, the consultants we've had from there, they've been variable, but they've all kind of had a viewpoint on what we're doing, and you should listen to other people's point of view, and you might choose to ignore it, or you might choose to adopt it. And I think we've adopted probably a couple of things, 1 or 2 things each time we've had an audit, where they've acted as a counsellor again or consultant, and given us ideas.
And always then ever improving, which obviously that's exactly what you want in a business. So
yeah, well that's the whole point of the quality system, isn't it? Is to be always looking for ways to improve, and they might just be a little marginal gain here or there, but we know from the sports science side of things that all those little marginal gains add up. So that's definitely one of the things that I feel that we've taken away from this, not just the certificate that you can show to people, but that kind of ambition to improve and constantly reflect upon, are we getting better?
That's perfect. Thank you so much. So today I have been talking to Alistair and Claire from Lazarus Training. Thank you so much for joining me on today's episode. I hope you've enjoyed it. So you have been listening to Exploring Standards with Jess. I will be back on with another episode in a couple of weeks. But in the meantime, if you could like, review and subscribe, it really helps the channel. Thank you so much.